We all want to stay in the loop, right? But who has the time to wade through all the noise just to get to the key points? That's what we're trying to do here. Cut through it all. And today, we're taking a deep dive into something really big happening over in Southeast Asia. It's the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, the JSSEZ.
The JSSEZ, a great example of two countries spotting an opportunity to really work together. You've got Malaysia with all its resources and land, and then you have Singapore, a global powerhouse when it comes to finance and tech. They're teaming up to turbocharge economic growth over in Johor, and this isn't something that just popped up overnight either.
Right, it's been in the works.
Yeah. It all started with a memorandum of understanding back in January of 2024, and that paved the way for the official agreement, which they signed on January 7th this year, 2025.
So it's all about using those strengths that each country has, right? To create something bigger than what they could achieve on their own. And for everyone listening in, this is your chance to really grasp what this all means. What's the potential here? What are the implications for the future of Southeast Asia? And we're going to do it without bogging you down with tons of data and reports.
Exactly. Now, to get this information for you, we had to go through a whole lot of sources. Things like the official government documents where they lay out all the incentives. We've got reports from IRDA, that's the Iskandar Regional Development Authority. They're really at the heart of this whole thing. And then we've got the latest news articles keeping track of all the progress. And of course, you can't forget the expert opinions and, economists and folks actually working in the industries. They've got valuable insights. So let's jump into it. What's the big idea here? What's the vision behind this JSSEZ?
Well, from what we've gathered, the ultimate goal is to massively ramp up economic growth in the region. It's about breaking down all those barriers that make it hard for businesses and people to move freely and operate across that Johor-Singapore border. A seamless, integrated business environment with much better trade connections. That's what they're going for.
And it's not just some vague idea. They've got some hard targets they're aiming for.
Oh, yeah.
In the first 5 years, they want to attract at least 50 big projects. And then in the first decade, they're looking at 100 projects. But it's not just about quantity. They're really focused on creating high-quality jobs. 20,000 skilled positions right there in the JSSEZ. By 2030, they're shooting for a pretty impressive 7% to 8% GDP growth for the whole region.
Wow, those are some ambitious numbers.
Right.
Shows they're serious about making Malaysia and Singapore even bigger players on the global scene.
Yeah, it's not just about local growth. It's about taking their combined strengths, using their location. This area is right on some of the world's busiest shipping routes, and becoming a serious global hub for trade and investment.
Now, a huge factor for any economic zone is obviously location. Where exactly is this JSSEZ and what kind of connections does it have to the rest of the world right now?
So in terms of geography, the JSSEZ covers a pretty large area. It includes both Iskandar, Malaysia, and Pengerang. All in all, it comes to about 3,588 square kilometers in the southern part of Johor. This whole zone falls under 6 local authorities.
So in terms of getting in and out, what kind of international connections are already there?
The region already has a good network. Things like Senai International Airport. Then there's Johor Port, the port of Tanjung Pelepas. That's a major one for container ships. And then you've got the port of Tanjung Langsat. These are all well-established hubs for trade and travel.
But I know they've got some major improvements planned for the infrastructure. Tell me more about those.
Well, one of the big ones everyone's talking about is the Johor-Bahru-Singapore Rapid Transit System, the RTS Link. It's essentially a dedicated cross-border train line. As of February this year, they were already about halfway done with the system installations. And the tracks that will connect to Woodlands in Singapore should be finished by July. They're aiming to have the whole thing up and running by December 2026. That's going to be huge for commuters going back and forth between the two countries.
Yeah, anyone who's ever gotten stuck in traffic on the causeway knows how important that is. What about improvements within Johor Bahru itself? Anything in the works there?
There's a lot of talk about bringing in a light rail transit system or an LRT, maybe even an autonomous rapid transit network. They call it ART. Starting in the Bukit Chgar area, this would really make it easier to get around the city and connect everything better within the whole zone.
And what about connections to other parts of Malaysia?
The Jemas Johor Bahru electrified double-track railway project is almost done. They're saying it'll be finished by the third quarter of 2025. That's going to be a big boost for both passenger and freight transport between Johor and the rest of peninsular Malaysia.
So they're really going all in on improving the movement of people and goods. And I know they're big on using tech to streamline things even further. How's it going to work?
A lot of the focus is on making those border crossings smoother and faster. So they're increasing the capacity to process travelers. They're bringing in automated immigration lanes. And for cargo, they're moving to paperless systems for clearance. In fact, they've already started using QR codes for immigration clearance for Malaysians. They want to have that in place for everyone with a passport by the middle of 2025.
That QR code thing sounds pretty smart. It should help with the congestion. And I think I read something about maybe using the second link more for commercial traffic.
Yes, they're looking into how to encourage more trucks and commercial vehicles to use the second link. This could help to spread out the traffic a bit and keep those goods moving across the border more smoothly.
Okay, so we've talked about location and all those improvements to connections. Let's get down to the economic side of things. What are the main industries they're hoping to attract to the JSSEZ?
They've got their sights set on 11 key economic sectors. It seems like they're going for a diverse and resilient economy. These sectors are manufacturing, logistics, food security, tourism, energy, which includes both traditional and renewables, the digital economy, the green economy, financial services, business services in general, education, and healthcare.
That's pretty comprehensive. Why these particular areas? What's the logic there?
This strategy seems to be attracting investments that will bring in money and jobs, of course, but also make the economy more sophisticated overall. They want to boost innovation, accelerate the use of digital technologies, and importantly, support their goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions.
So they're thinking about the future and making sure the economy is sustainable. You mentioned renewable energy. What are their plans for that specifically?
There's a definite push to make it easier to develop renewable energy projects within the JSSEZ, and they also want to set up the infrastructure needed for cross-border electricity trading between Malaysia and Singapore. This is a big part of their green economy plan.
To make the zone even more attractive for businesses involved in international trade and manufacturing, are they thinking about setting up any special zones or facilities?
You bet. They're exploring the idea of creating new designated free trade zones within the JSSEZ, and they're looking at ways to make it easier for companies to get licenses for manufacturing warehouses in the area.
Right, so to make all this happen, they need to offer some pretty compelling incentives. What can businesses expect if they decide to set up shop there? I know these incentives were implemented at the beginning of this year.
Okay, so let's start with the Manufacturing Business Incentive Scheme. They're offering some very attractive tax breaks. New companies that come in and make really big investments over 1 billion ringgit, excluding the cost of land in high-tech sectors, like the supply chains for artificial intelligence and quantum computing medical devices, pharmaceuticals, aerospace manufacturing, and maintenance repair and overhaul services, what they call MRO. They can get a really low corporate tax rate of just 5%. And this lasts for 15 years. These are categorized under what they're calling flagship F&E.
Wow, so that's a big long-term advantage. What about for companies that maybe can't invest quite that much but still want to be part of those key manufacturing sectors?
Right. So for new companies in those same sectors, investing somewhere between 500 million and 1 billion ringgit, again, excluding the land costs, they also get a 5% corporate tax rate. But for them, it's for a period of 10 years.
Are there any incentives specifically for Malaysian companies that might be thinking about bringing their operations back home from overseas?
Definitely. Existing Malaysian companies that decide to relocate their overseas manufacturing facilities back to Malaysia, and I should emphasize this has to be for a brand new business segment, not just expanding what they already have. And they need to invest over 500 million ringgit again, excluding land. They can qualify for a very generous investment tax allowance, or ITA. This means they can deduct 100% of their eligible capital spending within the first 5 years from their taxable income. It's a big incentive to bring those operations and expertise back home.
Sounds like a strong push for reshoring. Now let's talk about the services sector. I know there's an initiative called Global Services Hub.
Right. This is all about attracting those companies that manage regional operations. Strategic business planning, corporate development, regional or global treasury functions, things like managing cash flow across different parts of a company through intermediaries here in Malaysia. Companies that fit the criteria can get a special lower corporate tax rate of 5%. And this can last up to 15 years. These types of businesses fall under flagships A and B, which are the Johor waterfront and the Iskandar areas.
What are the specifics? What does a company need to do to qualify for those Global Services Hub incentives?
There are a few things. They need to have a minimum annual operating expenditure of 50 million ringgit. They have to be serving or controlling at least 10 companies within their network. Their annual turnover needs to be at least 500 million ringgit with proof that they're bringing foreign currency into the Malaysian banking system. And here's an important one, at least 50% of their higher paying jobs, those that pay at least 10,000 ringgits a month, have to be filled by full-time Malaysian employees.
So they're really aiming for those high-level multinational operations and making sure they're creating good jobs for Malaysians. Now, what about tourism? I saw there's a specific incentive for integrated tourism projects.
Yep. For tourism projects that combine a hotel with at least 80 rooms and a major tourist attraction, something like a theme park or a big convention center, they can get a 100% investment tax allowance on eligible capital expenses over a 5-year period. This can then be used to reduce their taxable income by up to 70% each year. This falls under Flagship G, which is the Desaru-Penawar area.
So what are the rules? What does a tourism project need to do to qualify for that?
They can't already have a business doing the same kind of thing, a hotel or tourism project in Malaysia. Their paid-up capital needs to be at least 2.5 million ringgit. And their total investment, excluding the land cost, has to be at least 500 million ringgit.
Okay, so they're after big new tourism developments that offer more than just a place to stay. Now, what about logistics? It's so essential for any economic zone to thrive.
For smart logistics complexes, things like regional distribution hubs, integrated logistics services facilities for storing dangerous goods, cold chain storage facilities, all that they offer a 100% investment tax allowance on qualifying capital expenditures over 5 years. This can be used to offset 100% of their taxable income. This is under Flagship C, which is the Tanjung Pelepis area.
What makes a logistics complex smart enough for those incentives? What are they looking for?
Okay, so to qualify, the investment, excluding the cost of land, has to be at least 500 million ringgit. The warehouse complex needs to have at least 50,000 square meters of built-up area. And it needs to be using at least 3 technologies that are part of what they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or IR 4.0, things like automation and data analytics. They also need to use modern construction methods, meet certain standards for the industrial building system, employ a workforce that's at least 80% Malaysian citizens, and at least 30% of their higher paying jobs, those making 10,000 ringgit a month or more, have to be filled by Malaysians.
So it's all about using cutting edge tech and making sure they're employing local talent in the logistics sector. I also noticed there are specific incentives for what they call manufacturing downstream specialty chemicals.
You're right. Companies that are investing at least 500 million ringgit, excluding the land costs in manufacturing activities related to things like basic chemicals, organic intermediates, specialty chemicals, fertilizers, polymers and plastics, oleochemicals and biochemicals, they've got some options. They can choose between a special lower corporate tax rate, either 5% or 10% for a period of 10 years. Or they can go for an income tax exemption that's equivalent to an investment tax allowance. Again, that could be 100% or 60% for up to 10 years. And they can use this to offset 100% of their taxable income. This falls under Flagship D, which is the Tanjung Langsat Kong area.
So what does a downstream specialty chemical manufacturer have to do to be eligible for those incentives?
It needs to be either a brand new company or an existing company that's moving into these specific areas. And their paid up capital has to be at least 2.5 million ringgit when they apply for the incentives.
It seems like they really thought this through. A targeted set of incentives for all these different industries. Were there any other noteworthy incentives? Anything we should mention?
Yeah, there are a few more. There's a 40% exemption on stamp duty for anyone transferring or financing unsold commercial properties in flagships A and B. That one went into effect at the end of last year. To give tourism a boost, they're offering a tax deduction of up to 1 million ringgit per year for companies that sponsor those big signature events in Flagship G, the ones that are supported by the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. That applies for contributions made between 2025 and 2034. And one more thing. For companies that get approved for tax incentives under either the Promotion of Investments Act or the Income Tax Act between now and 2034, and they're operating in any of the flagships, A through G, they can claim a one-time capital allowance for the costs of renovating their commercial buildings. And that covers a lot of stuff.
That capital allowance could really come in handy for companies looking to set up shop or upgrade their facilities.
Absolutely. It covers everything from the electrical and lighting systems to plumbing, kitchen, and bathroom fittings, doors, partitions, flooring, even those environmentally friendly and smart building solutions. They get a 20% initial allowance and then a 40% annual allowance.
What about attracting talented professionals to work in the JSSEZ?
Yeah.
Any incentives there?
Yeah, they've got the knowledge worker incentive, which applies to all the flagship areas. Malaysians and non-Malaysians who haven't earned any employment income in Malaysia for the 2 years before they take a job in the JSSEZ and who are making over 20,000 ringgits a month can get a flat income tax rate of just 15% on their chargeable employment income. and this lasts for 10 years. Of course, they have to meet certain qualifications and experience requirements and be working in sectors that qualify under the MICAL framework in the JSSEZ's target industries. Oh, and I almost forgot, they've also lowered entertainment duties starting this year, which should be good for the leisure and tourism industries.
That 15% flat tax rate definitely makes the region more appealing for top talent. So they've got all these incentives and plans. But how are they actually going to help businesses get set up and running in the JSSEZ?
Well, they've created something called the Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center, Johor, or IMFCJ. Think of it as a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to invest or do business in the JSSEZ.
Who's running this center?
It's a joint effort by a few key players. You've got the Iskandar Regional Development Authority, or IRDA. Then there's Invest Johor, which is the state's investment promotion agency. And you've got MIDA, the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, which operates at the federal level. What makes the center so powerful is that it's connected to all sorts of federal, state, and local government bodies, as well as important players in the private sector.
What kind of services does this IMFCJ actually provide? What can businesses expect?
They offer a whole range of services. They give advice on investment opportunities. They help companies apply for all those incentives. They handle things related to land development and approvals. They help with getting employment passes for expats and applications for MACS, the Malaysia Automated Clearance System. Their goal is to make the whole investment process as smooth and efficient as possible. And they work closely with all sorts of ministries, departments, and agencies to streamline everything.
So it sounds like they're serious about cutting through the red tape and making it as easy as possible for businesses to set up and operate in the JSSEZ. Okay, so taking everything into account, why should a company choose this zone over other options in the region? What are the big advantages?
Well, there are a lot of good reasons. First off, you've got those competitive cost advantages, things like lower costs for real estate and labor. Combine that with the very attractive tax incentives, and it becomes a very appealing option financially. Then you've got strong support from both the Malaysian and Singaporean governments. They're both fully committed to making the JSSEZ a success. And the fact that they've set up this IMFCJ shows they're serious about making it easy for businesses.
And I imagine the location is a major plus.
You bet. That strategic location and the strong connections they have both within the region and to global markets are a huge draw. Businesses in the JSSEZ can get their goods in and out efficiently using Singapore's world-class ports and airport, not to mention Johor's own international transport hubs. And those planned infrastructure upgrades are only going to make things even better.
And of course, we've already talked about all those attractive and very targeted policies and incentives. What else makes the JSSEZ stand out?
Well, they've got these designated flagship areas within the JSSEZ, each focusing on specific sectors and offering tailored incentives. It's a very focused approach for investors. There are 7 flagship zones with specific JSSEZ incentives. They're Johor Bahru Waterfront, Iskandar Puteri, Tanjung Pelepas, Tanjung Langsat, Kangkang Senai, Skudai Kulai Sednak, and Desur Penawar. And there are 2 other areas, Forest City Special Financial Zone and the Pengerang Integrated Petroleum Complex, that already have their own set of incentives.
So investors can really zero in on specific zones that fit perfectly with their industry and what they want to do. What about the workforce? Are there enough skilled people available?
The region benefits from a highly skilled workforce in both Malaysia and Singapore. And the JSSEZ programs are designed to further develop and attract talent through various initiatives like that knowledge worker tax break we talked about. And here's a big one. You have the chance to tap into Singapore's highly developed and sophisticated value chain, but you can do it from Johor where the costs are generally lower.
It does sound like a pretty compelling package for businesses and investors. So assuming everything goes according to plan, what kind of benefits and opportunities can we realistically expect to see from the JSSEZ?
The potential benefits are huge. We should see a lot of job creation. Their initial goal is 20,000 skilled jobs within the first 5 years. And those jobs will come from all the investment, both domestic and international, that's expected to flow into the region. We're talking billions of ringgit.
What about companies that are already based in Singapore? How will this affect them?
For companies in Singapore that are thinking about expanding into Malaysia, the JSSEZ should make things a lot more efficient. They could have lower operating costs, smoother customs procedures, access to a larger pool of talent. It's a win-win for both countries.
Any specific sectors that you think will really take off in the JSSEZ?
I think we'll see a lot of growth in those high-growth sectors like advanced manufacturing, AI-driven logistics, sustainable and renewable energy, and the digital economy, which is booming. The focus on technology and green initiatives is right in line with global trends.
For individual investors, not just businesses, what are some of the potential opportunities?
As the economy in the region grows, there's a good chance we'll see property values go up in Johor. And those tax incentives could be attractive for people looking to preserve their wealth or optimize their tax strategies. I think we might also see growth in financial services and cross-border lending as more and more businesses set up shop in the zone.
And it seems like the JSSEZ could also have an impact on a much larger scale.
Absolutely. With all the uncertainty in global trade right now, it could be a very attractive entry point for foreign investors who want to get into the broader ASEAN market. And they've made it clear that they want this region to become a major hub for data centers, especially with all the planned infrastructure and connectivity.
Of course, with any project this big, there are going to be some challenges. What are some of the hurdles you see ahead?
One of the biggest ones is going to be making sure everything gets implemented smoothly and on time. Any big delays or inconsistencies could scare away investors. It's also going to be crucial to develop the infrastructure fast enough. Things like roads, transport networks, logistics facilities, utilities. They have to keep up with all that investment that's expected to come in.
And we've talked about how important skilled labor is. Do you see any problems meeting the demand for talent as these industries grow?
Definitely something to watch. They'll need to have really effective education training and talent attraction programs to make sure they have enough skilled workers. That's crucial for the long-term success of the JSSEZ. Policymakers will also have to navigate the geopolitical landscape very carefully, and it's super important that they have that long-term political stability and commitment from both Malaysia and Singapore.
What about the businesses that are already operating in Johor? Any concerns there?
It's important that they think about the smaller local businesses. How will they deal with increased competition and potentially higher operating costs when all these larger, often international companies start moving in? It's something they need to address carefully. And finally, they really need to learn from the past. What worked, what didn't work with other big projects like Iskandar, Malaysia. It all comes down to having consistent policies and making sure things get done effectively over the long term.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. How does this JSSEZ fit into the bigger picture of ASEAN integration?
I think the JSSEZ has the potential to be a model for other cross-border economic zones within ASEAN. If it's successful, it'll really show the benefits of close collaboration between member states.
It seems to be in line with ASEAN's goals of greater economic cooperation.
Exactly. It directly supports their broader integration goals. It strengthens the economic ties between Malaysia and Singapore, and that creates new opportunities for both countries to benefit. Plus, it could create some positive ripple effects for other ASEAN economies, too. Ultimately, it could really strengthen ASEAN's position as a global hub for investment and trade.
So to wrap things up, it sounds like the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone is a really ambitious and potentially transformative project.
It really is. Malaysia and Singapore are working together on this. They've set some pretty ambitious goals. And with those attractive incentives, the strategic location, all the infrastructure upgrades they're planning, it has the potential to significantly change the economy of Johor for the better. And I think the benefits will be felt throughout ASEAN.
For everyone listening in, I hope this deep dive is giving you a clear understanding of what this JSSEZ is all about. It definitely presents a lot of opportunities for businesses, investors, and skilled professionals who are looking at Southeast Asia's growth potential.
But of course, it's important to keep in mind that this is a massive undertaking. There are bound to be some bumps along the way. It'll be important to watch how things are implemented and be prepared for potential challenges.
And here's a final thought for you to ponder. As the global economy keeps changing, becoming more interconnected and potentially more fragmented at the same time, what kind of role will these cross-border economic zones play in the future? What can other regions around the world learn from this JSSEZ model as they try to boost their own regional competitiveness and find new avenues for growth? That's something to think about as we finish up our deep dive for today.